and then finding different modalities. It is really difficult to sit, a special operator or an assaulter down and say, look, man, I need you to talk to me, because we don't want to do that shit.
That's right.
It's squishy, it's touchy and feely. I don't leave me alone. I want to go back and deploy.
Yeah.
So I think that a lot of organizations have decided you don't get the choice anymore. There will be a mental rehabilitation just like physical, and you need to embrace it. And so I think destigmatizing and then having different treatment modalities in concert together has been the biggest thing that I've seen.
This video is brought to you by Ice Warrior Tactical, Carcajou Tactical, and Gray Fox Strategic. For 10% off your next purchase with Gray Fox Strategic or Carcajou Tactical, use code DA10.
All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us and logging in today, checking this out. We got Brad Colbert as a guest here today. So Brad, thanks for making the time. Really appreciate it. For folks that, maybe not be aware of who you are and what you've done with a very colorful career. Congratulations, by the way. Maybe just share with us where you're located and tell us a little bit about yourself, Brad.
Yeah, absolutely. So I currently reside in Georgia. That's where I sort of retired to when my career with the Marine Corps was over. I did 21 years on active duty with the U.S. Marine Corps, entirely with the reconnaissance and force reconnaissance community. I have just 3 combat deployments. I was in Afghanistan after the fall of the towers in 2001, and then 2 trips to Iraq, most notably the initial invasion in 2003, which was the source material for a magazine article, a book, and then later an HBO miniseries entitled Generation Kill. And since then, yeah.
Awesome. And since you retired in 2016, what's been keeping you busy up until this point?
Yeah, so I was working until very recently for a government agency as a freelance contractor. And then I ended that a few months ago. I'm basically switching towards my whiskey distillery business and firearms almost full time. And of course, a podcast of my own and some other media presence.
Good for you. And with the firearms business, are you providing training for law enforcement, military, general public, a little bit of everything, or what's that look like? Strictly manufacturing. So a small little firearms manufacturing company in America, still eligible for those AR-15 and AK series firearms. So I manufacture those from scratch, and then I do a lot of Glock modification and some other gunsmithing work for folks. Good for you. That's awesome.
Thanks.
And you do that right out of your place of residence, or do you have an offsite location?
Yep. I have a shop right here at the homestead, and then the whiskey distillery is also on the property. I have 11 acres, and it shares about an acre and a half off and in the side area there.
Yeah, right on. Good for you. Good stuff. Cool, man. Well, if you don't mind, maybe we'll start off. We'll chat a little bit about your upbringing. So, where did you grow up? What kind of family lifestyle did you have that led you into the military? And then we'll talk a little bit about your road to the Marines and what kind of guided that path. So, what was your upbringing like? Where did you grow up, and did you have brothers and sisters? What did that look like?
So I do. I have a younger brother, 3 years younger than I. And we primarily grew up in Southern California, San Diego area. That was the bulk of my life. I moved around a bit, wasn't originally from there, but that's where I lived for a good 33 years of this portion of my planet.
Right on.
It was so middle-class upbringing, a mom, a dad, fairly suburban lifestyle. Lots of outdoor activities. I swam competitively in high school and lettered in swimming and did a lot of lifeguarding and swimming instruction growing up, and then as a career, or at least a job to start with. I think for me, the Marines was something that I wanted to do from a very young age, probably 8 or 9 years old. The Marines have always had a mystique for me. The lifestyle, the Marines engender, the ethos, they do a great job of their advertising campaign, except for that stint where they had a dragon as part of their ad campaign. That shit can go away, but the rest of it was It's really good. I think the Marines are one of those few forces in the U.S. where they say, we don't need you, you need us, join or don't, we don't care. So that's good.
Right. Yeah, my exposure to the Marines has been positive. In 2002, when we were in Afghanistan I was with the PPCLI at that time, so one of the infantry organizations in Canada, and we had a joint operation plan with a group of Marines. And a day or two prior to that operation in Afghanistan, some of the Marines were involved in a pretty heavy tick. So some troops in contact where they suffered, I believe it was 3 or 4 casualties. I think it was 4 casualties. And we thought, oh man, that's going to put everything on the back burner. Obviously, these guys are going to need some time to mourn and kind of regroup. And I remember a commander from the Marines came down and he kind of pulled the Canadian contingent together and said, listen, yeah, it's unfortunate. He said, but the best thing that we can do is kind of honor these men and we're gonna regroup and we're gonna get after it. And there was no hesitation. It was all business, full flight, and just remarkable. I'll never forget that. He was motivational speaker. You could tell he was, trying to keep his emotions in check, but to the point, and basically said, listen, we're going, with or without you guys. So let's go. It was pretty remarkable.
I'm glad to hear that. I think that the fighting spirit of the Marine Corps, which just celebrated its 250th birthday, has definitely been demonstrated globally for centuries. So I'm glad your experience was positive.
Yeah, it certainly was. For viewers that may be unaware, maybe you could break down the branch structure with the Americans. So Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Special Forces. What would if somebody was interested, a young man, young woman is interested in going down the pipeline, what is it about the Marines that makes it a little bit different than some of the other branches?
Well, I think first and foremost, it's the fact that every Marine is a rifleman, and every Marine has to go through the same combat pipeline, regardless of what their future occupational specialty might be. And that similarity of training, which is the longest in American military services, it's 3 months long. It definitely bonds through hardship every single Marine recruit. And so from the beginning of your career, you look left and right, no matter what job a Marine may be doing, they're baselined, all of them.
Right.
And I think that is amazing in and of itself. The other thing is the Marine Corps is small. We're about 180,000 plus or minus. That's fairly small for the U.S. military. It may be large compared to other countries, but for the U.S., we're the baby service. And the fact that we are, by an act of U.S. Congress, able to be deployed without congressional approval at any time, anywhere, we are the nation's 911 force.
Right.
That, and I think, the no nonsense, everyone's held to a standard ethos. I think that's incredibly unique in all of the world's forces. Yeah,
I agree. And would it be safe to say that the Marines are essentially known as the true expeditionary force for the U.S. Military, but not just the U.S. military, but also, like you alluded to, that response from the government agencies that are requiring such a force to do certain things like that. And with that, if I'm accurate in saying such, for folks that may be not aware, what does an expeditionary force unit, what are they primarily mandated and responsible for?
Yeah, that's an outstanding question. For many people who may not know, there are at any given time 2 to 3 amphibious readiness groups patrolling the world. These groups comprise themselves of a few amphibious assault ships or amphibious ships that are capable of dispatching within their cargo hold, smaller vessels of a variety of things. And they also have helicopters on the flight deck. And their job is to patrol the oceans for 6 to 9 months at a time and respond in force to any trouble that may present itself, whether it's evacuation of Americans, whether it is responding to a terrorist threat, humanitarian disaster, anything U.S. foreign policy needs. there are several thousand Marines and sailors already pre-deployed, patrolling the waters in all of them, and able to respond. So that level of expeditionary force projection is unique in the world. The U.S. is the only country that does it in perpetuity. I mean,
right.
There is constantly a workup cycle of 6 to 9 months of training, and then you're gone, and then you recover while someone else is backfilling you. So the American military is the only one that can afford it. We're the only ones.
Yeah, it definitely it comes with a price tag for sure. Just to keep up all of those skill sets, with all the maintenance that's required for all the personnel, that's a huge price tag for sure. But remarkable that the Americans have got a force with such a readiness mandate is pretty impressive.
It is, yeah.
You know what else I found interesting too is, and you might have been part of this, in 2003 when they entered into Iraq, I was on in preparation for selection, and then 2004 I was doing my assaulter course. At that time, there was conversations being had at our government level where there was potential of Canadians being involved with that infiltration. And at that time, I'm not sure if you recall or remember, were there conversations about the Canadians potentially being involved with that movement into Iraq? And if you remember, what was the temperature like? Did the people that you're working with at the time, did they even bat an eye, or were they so focused on what they were doing themselves that they didn't really care who was joining them in that type of operation?
I do remember that there was discussion about partner forces, who they would be, where they would be assigned, what the level of integration would be. I don't think that any of us at that time questioned the capabilities or what skills were going to be brought to bear with the addition of partner services. Only will other people be going in, or is the United States going to be doing this invasion unilaterally? I do recall discussions about Canadians, the Brits, I believe the French and Germans as well. I think those were the four that were banded about. I know that the Canadian military has always had a very close association with the U.S. military because we are so closely related geographically, but we share a common language, and a lot of our equipment and training is along very similar lines. So that interoperability was definitely there. But if I recall, most of the partner forces were going to be given their own section. I think that was in the infancy of a lot of the, joint operations that we did with partner forces. And so I don't think at that time there was a lot of appetite for placing foreign troops under domestic chains of command and vice versa.
Right.
So if memory serves, I believe that our sister services, Canadians and others, were given a lane to operate in and an objective to take, and then decentralized command.
Yeah, that's the way I understood it too. And I remember when we were on course at that time, Afghanistan was in full throttle. There was talks about the potential of another operation to support the Americans in Iraq. So for guys like myself, we were pretty excited because we knew we were going to be involved in one capacity or another. And our government made the decision, kind of the way I understand it, kind of in the 11th hour, and they chose not to commit to Iraq. For whatever the reasons were at that time. I just remember, being on course and thinking, I just got to get through this, because once we do, we know we're going to be operationally employed, and it's most likely going to be either Afghanistan or Iraq. But for that being said, it didn't come to fruition, and off you guys went. So what was that experience like? If you don't mind chatting about that a little bit. So first time putting boots in the ground in Iraq, what was the type of work that you were doing, and looking back at it, how much of it was rewarding in stuff that you're proud of?
Wow. Well, as I already mentioned, I had spent several months in Afghanistan immediately following the invasion. We were some of the first on the ground in that country since the 70s, as far as American forces went. So I'd already had exposure to some of the combat operations that would be coming up. But the difference in the invasion of Iraq is we were overthrowing an entire country. And we were not doing it on the small scale like we did for those few months in Afghanistan. I mean, we're talking, hundreds of thousands of people in a massive, massive preparatory fire before crossing the line of departure and over the border, and then all the way as north as we could possibly go before, basically the initial combat hostilities were called.
Right.
I guess to answer your question, I feel that we did a lot of good in that moment. There was, like any standing army, a morality preventing at least Western forces from limiting civilian casualties, and there's no looting and pillaging and the destruction of property, and be respectful of and within limits of national architecture, monuments, mosques, things of that nature. Your job is to engage the military, limit casualties and collateral damage, and then declare victory, right? And no different than with our Western allies, that we all share that same philosophy. And so to that end, I'm proud of just how fast and how surgical the operation was, considering what was being undertaken. I mean, I don't know the last time a country was overthrown, but it'd been a while. And it wasn't nearly this neat and tidy. And I don't mean to say that life wasn't lost and that shit was not fucked up, because it was, but
of course,
we helped a lot of people along the way, providing medical and food. And I think that the way that I've always sort of thought about Iraq was, we did a great job with the war, and then we totally lost the peace.
Right. Yeah, that's for folks that don't know, like it's tough to explain. War is complicated. It's difficult. Trying to minimize collateral damage, in some cases trying to win hearts and minds, trying to, befriend and build trust with people who you don't know if they're even trustworthy. It's difficult. It's not easy. And, unlike us, where we're wearing like uniforms, the people that we're after, not always the case. So trying to decipher who's friendly, who's foe, it's difficult. It's not an easy thing. It's certainly not sexy. There's a lot of residue that gets left with the member after their years of service. It's remarkable in the sense that when American forces decide to do something, they're all in. They are, from my experience, there's no half-ass approach. People can criticize from a distance who have never got their boots dirty, but from my experience, man, it's been nothing but respect and admiration for American forces doing what they've been doing for many, many years. And, for what it's worth, my hat's off to you folks for what you've done, and especially your career too. Like, you've had a very colorful career. It's something to be proud of, for what it's worth.
No, I appreciate that. And it's definitely something that you identify with. Fighting an asymmetrical enemy is so much more challenging than the symmetrical battlefields of World War II, Korea, and honestly, even, Vietnam and some of the Southern wars that we fought in the interim. Fighting an enemy that doesn't wear a uniform, does not declare themselves as combatants, hides among the civilian population, and uses them as shields. Man, that's a tough enemy to have to go about. And like you said, you have to win the hearts and minds along the way, because if you don't, you're going to empower those people to pick up arms against you as well. Yeah, that's not that's a steep hill to climb for sure. But the reason that we, a lot of us choose that lifestyle is for the challenge. It is not easy. It's not for everybody for sure, but the ones that decide to do that and commit fully, they ought to be respected and applauded for their efforts. Of course, like every organization, every institution has a handful of bad apples that sometimes will, maybe cast the wrong light. But if we put our focus on the 90% that believe in doing the good, then, we're focused in the right areas, I believe. No, I completely agree. Well said.
And, there's another experience that I had too was with the folks from the Marines when we were in Afghanistan together. There was dudes that we had a chance to work with who were literally going from Afghanistan to Iraq before they were going home. And I remember asking a group of guys that we were hanging out with one night, what does that tour look like? And the guy said, well, man, I hope it's no longer than 9 months. My wife is going to kill me. And, the fact that he was saying that with a smirk, but knowing that he was literally going to be in Afghanistan for, I think it was 4 or 5 months. And then from there, no break, right from Afghanistan to Iraq. I mean, it's just remarkable. Really is.
It is. And the U.S. took quite a lot of time to understand what the correct dwell time should be for deployed forces. And towards the latter half, we finally figured it out. But it takes a toll. It takes a toll, not just on the active duty service member, but on that support network that's behind them. So whether that's a wife, a husband, children, parents, an aging grandmother that they're responsible for taking care of, it is taxing. It is on so many levels.
And let's talk about that a little bit, because I know you, correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand you have an interest in understanding and in explaining to folks, ways and methods to get through post-traumatic stress disorder or stress injury, as it's sometimes referred to. I think we've come a long way over the last 10 years, understanding it and helping members a little bit better than the early days of Afghanistan and Iraq. But from your perspective, what have you seen changed over the last maybe, since you've retired, that is definitely a positive in terms of it's going to help members along the way for futures to come?
I think first and foremost, there's definitely been a lot of headway in destigmatizing mental health. When I enlisted, and I'll date myself, I enlisted in 95 and I retired in 2016. So during those decades, I saw quite a change in attitude of society and military towards mental health. And not just in the active duty forces, but in the private sector as well, and some of your first responders. Mm-hmm. Because for far too long, there has been shame involved in invisible injuries. And it took a lot of people at the top of their game in all of the services to sort of showcase themselves as examples of, no, it's okay. I know it's not the same thing as a broken arm or a torn rotator cuff, but it is just as serious and should be taken just as serious. There's nothing wrong with you if you need I need a timeout. Mm-hmm. This is troubling for me, and it is affecting my performance on the battlefield. So take a moment, let me fix it, and I'll be right with you.
Right.
So I think that is the biggest change that I have seen, is the acceptance of invisible injuries towards treatment. I think that there has been a lot of research into understanding the second and third order effects of these invisible wounds on the human and the unit readiness. And then finding different modalities. It is really difficult to sit, a special operator or an assaulter down and say, look, man, I need you to talk to me, because we don't want to do that shit.
That's right.
It's squishy. It's touchy and feely. I don't leave me alone. I want to go back and deploy.
Yep.
So I think that a lot of organizations have decided you don't get the choice anymore. There will be a mental rehabilitation just like physical, and you need to embrace it. And so I think destigmatizing and then having different treatment modalities in concert together has been the biggest thing that I've seen.
Yeah, likewise. We've seen a big change here in Canada over the last decade or so. And one of the areas, like you just alluded to, is no longer a choice. It's a mandatory thing, just like a firearms requal or an annual fitness test. Those are mandatory things you got to do to, prove and maintain your proficiencies. Well, same with mental health. If the CPU is not functioning properly, we got to fix that first, because that's essentially going to drive the battle chassis. And I think a lot of organizations are doing a lot better now, recognizing that earlier. So, baselines are assessed and established early. Check-ins are happening annually, if not more often than they once were. So I think that everyone's on the right track. It's good for the member, and ultimately it's good for the organization and for the cause as well. So it's good to hear that, because I'm sure lots of guys that, at one point or another in their career, we're into a bit of a speed wobble. And like you suggested earlier, hey, it's okay to not be okay temporarily. Just like a common cold or a broken arm, it will heal, we'll get you back, and everything will be back on track. I think for some guys, and I can only speak from my own personal experience, when those questions start to enter the brain and we second guess our ability to perform, sometimes we feel like we're letting the guys down, and sometimes we struggle with the reality of we're not performing our best. We recognize it, but rather than acknowledging it and trying to seek help, we just try harder, or we'll take on more. And then sometimes that tempo or that, that chronic level of just constant output eventually will have a breaking point, and then it tends to be the point of no return, which is unfortunate.
No, you're absolutely correct. I mean, the guys that do what we do are type A personalities, and a type A personality doesn't want to admit weakness. That's hard. And it's hard to admit to yourself, and then to verbalize that and say, I can't do a thing. I need your help, man. That is hard to do.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's good to hear that things are, getting a little bit better. And at the end of the day, each member, once they decide to take that journey and climb into the uniform and serve their country, hopefully what they know is there are outlets there to help them, not only when they're in a bit of a speed wobble, but so they can perform optimally and more consistently. So that's good news.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit with your family. So are you married? Do you have kids? Like, what does your family construct look like?
Yep. Nope. Not married. Significant other. Kids. I kind of split my time between, here and Northern Virginia for some work, and juggling the kids, and that logistics is challenging a lot of times. But as I've grown, what I've learned is that the best legacy that I can possibly leave are my children. And so I try to do my darndest to make certain that they are the focus, that they feel like they are the focus, that they know that I'm available for them, that, regardless of how long I'm gone and what I'm doing and how busy I am, that that I always have time for them, that they are the best thing that I have done in my life, and the thing that I'm most proud of.
Good for you, man. And how old are your kids, if you don't mind me asking?
Not a problem. I've got little boys, and I have an 18-year-old daughter who is off to college and doing well. It's challenging with little boys, especially at this age in my life, because it's a young man's game. You shouldn't be having young children when you're in your 50s. I don't recommend it. So it's definitely something that has kept me on my toes and aged me considerably.
Yeah, good stuff. Keeping you young, maybe.
In some ways, in some ways, keeping me young. They've definitely challenged my patience.
And with your 18-year-old daughter, has she ever expressed any interest in the military? Have you guys had those types of conversations and kind of, what you're feeling on if she were to take that avenue?
Yeah, we have not. She is sort of superficially aware that I was active duty and my somewhat aware of my career, but not with any great fidelity. And she has not expressed any interest in active duty. She wants to go into education, and that's great. If she did want to enlist, or join, I mean, it would definitely be a conversation. I definitely don't denigrate the military, because it was some of the proudest moments of my life. But I think as parents, we always want to see our children do something better. And that's a really weird thing for me to say, because I spent so much time in the military, and it's not that the military is not the great self-sacrifice that it is, but I would love it if she would, go on to get a master's or even a PhD and do something more cerebral instead of sleep in the dirt and eat shitty food for days on end while she looks for a very obscure objective.
Yeah, for sure. Good stuff. Shifting gears here, if you don't mind, maybe we'll take a little journey down the Generation Kill series.
So back in 2016, I was able to start working with Kydex, and the reason I wanted to start working with Kydex was because I was a left-handed shooter. Finding left-handed gear was extremely hard, so I just put two and two together, started working with Kydex, making left-handed holsters for myself. From there, quote-unquote, refined my process. Started making gear for buddies that were cops in military, and it literally snowballed from there.
Everything that we do is handmade by shooters for shooters, and there's a lot of other Kydex companies out there, and they are also for shooters by shooters. But we take the time and we care about what we do, and I think that shows in our products.
Like working here, this is our home. We brought it from home and we created a home. Our kids have worked here, so this is our home.
Aside from the obvious of what I like about them, they do keep your hands warm in the colder weather. So colder weather, I started using these last year when it was about -10. After an hour or two on the range with light shooting gloves, of course the fingers are going to get cold. So the inner glove, it has the dexterity required, so you can still do firearms manipulation, changing magazines, short note stoppages, which is good. And then for the moments where maybe we're standing around not doing a whole lot, or in between iterations on the range, for example, the outer glove adds another element to keep the hands warm when we're not requiring the dexterity. So inner and the outer glove combination, just like anything, the more you use it, the more it gets worked in and it becomes a little bit more favorable to the hands. But for the little bit that I have used them so far, dexterity good, overall warmth really good. So I watched a couple clips, pretty interesting stuff, some pretty funny moments as well. But yeah, share your perspective on Generation Kill and how you got yourself involved with that miniseries.
Well, it was thrust upon me. The reporter who documented and then later produced the book was he was assigned to my team. So I don't know if you know, but a reconnaissance team is comprised of 6 active duty Marines, usually led by an E5, and their job is to operate independently for long periods of time behind enemy lines, providing reconnaissance and intelligence of the battlefield, limited strikes, raids, things of that nature. The last thing that we're trained and equipped to do is babysit this print reporter.
Yeah.
But we didn't have a choice. He was assigned to us, and then that was it. He rode in our vehicle for the entire invasion of Iraq, and then, a goodly portion of the, sort of drawdown. And along the way, he documented everything. And I mean, everything that was said, all the activities that we did. I mean, he just filled notebook after notebook after notebook. And initially, I think a lot of my reservation was not so much his presence, but it was the burden of, hey, you're going to have to make sure that this civilian who's not organic to you is safe. And I said, sure. But then privately told him, you have to understand, if push comes to shove, I'm not going to come back for you. Okay. I mean, I've got the Marines to my left and right. That is my focus. You are an afterthought. And just so we're clear. And it turned out that there was sort of a needless statement, because he looked after himself pretty well. He did not become a burden. He didn't curl up into the fetal position in firefights. He actually did very, very well.
Amazing.
And yeah, I thought so too. He was an interesting individual and somebody that provided a lot of levity and entertainment to sort of the boredom, and then kept himself to himself in the middle of combat and firefights. And so for that, I was grateful. I guess my only regret is that I was never really able to bookend our friendship, because he took his life here recently.
Oh no.
Yeah. As so many people that we have known has, but yeah, I would have loved to have done sort of a postscript after the whole invasion and talk a little bit more in depth about how things look, 20 years on. But I never got that chance.
It's unfortunate.
Yeah.
So as an E5, for listeners that may be unaware, that would be a team leader in a Canadian equivalency, probably a sergeant who's responsible for that team. So in those responsibilities, some of the stuff that you'd be dealing with would be, pre-planning for operations, all the contingencies if something was to go awry, and then obviously fulfilling whatever mandate and task and detail that would be put upon you. What were some of the things that you were responsible for, knowing that you had a reporter with you during those operations as you're executing what was asked of you, knowing that you had the civilian with you? Was there any time where you thought maybe having him document this or have him exposed to some of the stuff could be jeopardizing to, the American flag or the organization as a whole? Were those situations ever present?
No, I don't think so. I had extraordinary trust and confidence in my Marines to uphold themselves to the highest standard. I don't think that there was ever a risk of a breach in morality or anything that violated the code of conduct. So I had no reservations about it being documented. I definitely was under a lot of scrutiny and criticism after things were done about allowing him insight into what was said and done. But as I have said then, and I'll say now, I had no control over this individual. I can't put a piece of duct tape over his mouth or take his notebooks away. I don't have that. I don't have that ability. But to answer your question directly, no, there was nothing that I modified in any of my plans, preparations, or application of said plans and preparations because of his presence. I told him early, and I told the team, we are doing business as usual. If he is in the way, he's going to become a casualty, or he's going to get out of the way. I'm not modifying anything because he was there.
And did you guys provide any training for him? So if, you guys were to come under contact, did you give him an opportunity? This is how you operate a carbine rifle, anything like that? Or was it more just find a safe area, stay in behind us, or how did that look?
No, a little bit of both. So we kind of laid down some basic rules of the road. We were in Kuwait at a staging area for weeks ahead of time with this individual. So we made sure that he understood how to use the gas mask, the mop gear, the 2-PAM cord and atropine. We explained how to function the weapon systems, both crew served and individual. And then, like you said, sort of gave him some guidance. If this happens, I need you to do this. And it kept it very simple. But, in the event everything goes pear-shaped, for God's sakes, pick the weapon up and save yourself. And he was a big dude. I mean, he was 6'4". He was a couple 100 pounds. I have no doubt that if push came to shove, he's going to defend himself. He was not a waif of a dude. So it worked out. He either was in the vehicle, or in the rare occasions that he was out of the vehicle while firefights were taking place, he positioned himself behind cover. And so, his human instinct kicked in at some point.
That's great. That's amazing. And how long was he embedded with you? So when you were on that deployment, was that months on end, days on end? How long was he with you?
It was months. It was just about 4.5 months.
4.5 months. Amazing.
Yeah.
Holy.
And a goodly portion of that was, in direct combat operations. So we didn't really get much of a break. And as you know, when you're with somebody in that level of high stress for that long of a period, there's a lot of bonding that takes place, and there's a lot of esprit de corps that's formed.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's talk about that a little bit. So with the team that you were running at that time, the bonding and it's just the crucibles that we go through together. Nothing will ever replace it. And then as the years go on and we all take different paths and we kind of go our separate ways, how much, if at all, are you still in touch with some of the team members that were with you during that deployment?
I am in touch with almost all of them. There's only a few that I haven't spoken to. In fact, I just had Ray Person, who drove the Humvee, who was my radio operator during that campaign, here at the house just for a couple of days. Others I speak to on the phone, or we'll exchange, a text message from time to time. So the bulk of them I do speak to even to this day, cool. Considering it's 20 years plus. I think, as you said, a lot of that reason is just that bond. Yeah.
And Ray, the driver, is the depiction of Ray pretty accurate? Is he really that chatty?
Yes. He was, pretty accurate. Yeah.
It sounds like he was a fun guy to have around for sure. Probably kept morale pretty high for the most part.
He is. And one of the nice things that I appreciated about both he and I is that no matter how chaotic things it would get, no matter how much the firefight would ramp up, we always remained calm, aware of our surroundings. Didn't become catatonic or, pressured speech, just sort of even keel. Let's do what needs to be done and move on to the next thing. And I like people like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I find, folks that operate really well under stress, those are unique individuals. There are some that can get there. I think some of it has to do with upbringing and exposures as a youngster, as a teenager will help with that. But I do think training, where I'm leading to this next question, is training has a large part to that. Would you say, from your experience, as you were preparing for deployments, what the Marines gave you in terms of training, was it adequate at that time? Was it risk adverse? Was it cowboyish? Like, what did it look like? What would the training look like in preparation for Iraq?
That's a good question. I feel that the training was excellent, but I also will say that a goodly portion of the group in my platoon that went to Iraq was also in Afghanistan. So we had a unique perspective on combat operations and mobile operations specifically already. And we took a lot of those lessons learned and procedures and carried them over to our training pipeline for Iraq.
Right.
And so I think that helped tremendously. I feel that
sure. I think the more, just like anything, the more you do something through repetition, you become maybe desensitized is not the right word, inoculated or comfortable with the realities of the discomfort that will bring. Yeah. And I can only speak from experience. Like, the first time being shot at, how I responded, what I thought I was going to do was very, very different. There was some questionable actions that were taken that I didn't expect.
Yes.
But it was the first time it happened. So there's a moment of reference material being built into the brainwaves of thought processes and decision making that, in my opinion, training will help you bridge that gap. But the reality is nothing will replace the experience. Do you agree with that?
Oh, I 100% agree. The first time we were shot at, it was more like I couldn't believe it. I was like, are we getting shot at? I think we're getting shot at. And then the next time it happens, it's like, oh fuck, they're shooting at us. And then it's just pure boredom and like, oh great, they're shooting at us again. Let's go and stop that shooting. And it's sort of the bell curve of it. But stress inoculation and repetition of training and honing that edge, that's a must have. You have to, and it has to be realistic. You can't be risk adverse. You have to accept the fact that you may get hurt in training, but that old adage, the more you sweat in peacetime, the less you bleed in war, man, that holds true. You know that.
Agreed. I couldn't agree more. I've been exposed to, a lot of different organizations, law enforcement and military. And I would say hesitantly, I understand it, but I don't fully agree with the amount of risk concern there is in training, where like simple things, if we're on a static shooting range, for example, officers or soldiers waiting to be told to pick up an empty magazine that's right by their foot because they don't want to get in trouble, or, an officer deems that as unsafe. It blows my mind. And that's why I say with hesitancy, I understand a concern for safety for sure. We don't necessarily want to take, unrealistic risk, but at the same time, we need to create training situations that are as close to the real. So those individuals, when they do face it for real, it's not the first time that they've been exposed to it.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. There's a great case study, and I'm probably going to mischaracterize the organization, but I believe it was New York City police officers who, there was an incident where they got into a firefight, and in the middle of the firefight stopped to pick the brass up off the ground. You might have heard the story. Because on the flat range, they were stopping every iteration of String of Fire to pick up their spent brass. And so muscle memory was built, and that's what they did in the firefight.
Right.
And that is a glaring example of training scars that carry forth, and why it's so important to do realistic training. I mean, as close to the bleeding edge as you can possibly get without, putting somebody's life at undue risk. As you said, I agree.
Yeah. It's a conversation that gets had quite a bit. And when the term training scar gets used, I find, a lot of people, they understand what a training scar is. They can explain it somewhat. And then generally what I kind of boil it down to, not to oversimplify it, because it is pretty complex how a training scar is created. But the way I kind of look at a training scar is, if we are choosing not to do something, there is a training scar that's embedded right before we even get started. And if the concern is, well, we shouldn't do that, or maybe we should do it a different way because it's dangerous, that's the time when training really starts, in my opinion. That's where you get people emotionally invested because they know there's consequences, and yes, it's during training, but that will level everybody up to be dialed into what it is that they're doing. So sometimes when I hear people have conversations about training scars, I'm like, well, the training scar happens before the training actually even happens. In preventing that, the execution of whatever the task is to unfold. Therefore, if we expose individuals to elements of training, we put everything in the front end saying, listen, the consequences are left, right, or, 1, 2, and 3. They already know that. They're smart, they're professional, they're adults. They understand that. We don't have to overemphasize the importance of, trigger finger placement and muzzle awareness. That is inherently understood because they were already trained professionals. I think, I find the training scar conversation really interesting, probably because I'm a little bit biased, where I'm in a position providing training on a pretty consistent basis. And, I love pushing the envelope. I would say I probably flirt at the edge of, that realism where safety is like, whoa, got to be careful here. But I think at the end of the day, if the motivation and the righteous intent is to help others and make them better, then we're only doing a good thing for them at the end of the day.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that. And a lot of the training that I was doing post Marine Corps for the government adopted that same ethos in many ways. And I think that that's truly the only way that you can, I think you do people a disservice when you don't. Really?
Right.
Yeah.
And in your delivery, when you're providing training, what kind of stuff were you doing, and what do you really enjoy about providing training? Is there an area specifically, like is there a modality or an area that you like to provide training for?
Well, I'm a huge fan of experiential learning. I think that we learn so much more from our mistakes than our successes, because oftentimes success can be accidental.
Agreed.
But if you learn 1,000 ways not to do something, man, you're way better than the person who gets it right accidentally one time.
Yep.
So I feel my philosophy towards training is put people in a scenario where it's a choose your own adventure. There's no right answer. Be able to articulate why you arrived at that answer, but come up with whatever solution you want. And then we'll diagnose it. We'll run it again, and you can try it differently and see what works this way. And I feel that if you can create an environment where it's okay to fail, there's no consequences for it, and you can reset the battlefield to try it again, that's the best environment to train, in my opinion.
I couldn't agree more. I think that's an awesome approach. And with some of the organizations that you've provided training, how was it received? Did you receive much pushback, or were they on board, or because of your background, they were eating up everything that you said and did no matter what?
I think wow, that's a tough one. I think it's a battle because there are people that are not subject matter experts that are placed in charge of training. And it's sort of an argument between the subject matter experts and the bureaucracy to win the day. The bureaucrats, or those that don't have any experience in doing, but are in charge of the teaching, will adopt a risk-averse attitude or a budgetary constraint, like, oh, it's too expensive, that's going to cost too many rounds, or tanks of gasoline, or we're going to break too many cars, or pick the thing, it doesn't matter. And then there's the other camp, the subject matter experts, which are pushing desperately for, no, it has to be this way, and here's why. And you try to find a sympathetic ear to allow you to do what you know to be right at the end of the day, balanced with real world constraints of, we only have so many hours in the day. There's only so many items of equipment that we have to train on, or a specific area that is available. So I guess to answer your question, yes, I would probably say 80 to 85% success. But as you know, their training is always a wheel. It's always circular. You train, and then you assess, and then you implement, and then you get feedback from the operating forces, and that influences a correction in training. And so that constant reassessment takes place. And I find that piece really fascinating, is the reassessment piece, where we might spend 3 or 4 days on a training segment, and maybe 15 to 20% of it is kind of retained, and of that 15%, there might be 5%, we'll say, that it has really been a significant game changer. And then because it's institutionalized, depending on the size and the number, that might take an additional series of months before it starts to take hold, and we actually see the benefits of the training. So I find that whole reassessment piece really fascinating, getting the feedback from what really hit the mark, what resonated with the audience, and then reinforcing it so it becomes the new normal. Yeah. The baseline, it's so difficult. And I would argue that that's the harder thing to do, is to collect metrics on the success of your training in the moment. It's very didactic. If you're on a range, I can score your target and say you've improved or you haven't. But what I struggle with is 6 to 9 months down the road, getting the metrics of, did it stay? Was it lasting? Did you regress? Did you improve? It's hard.
Was there any organization that you've been sought after to provide training for that you didn't really know a whole lot about their world and their environment? Was there any organizations that reach out and say, hey, we're looking for some training, and then you really had to do your homework to find out what is it that they need? How does the context of the situation drive what material you're going to provide for them? Was there any one organization that was a little bit more challenging for you?
No, I would say, because I've been pretty siloed to the same government organization for the last decade, I did move to a different training branch within, and that brought with it a different demographic of student. And that was challenging. But the organization as a whole remained pretty constant throughout my time. I also did a lot of training when I was on active duty with foreign and domestic. So to answer your question, no one has specifically sought me out because I was already tethered to a government agency.
Right.
And I just moved I moved the group that I was training under, I suppose.
Okay.
Mm.
Gotcha.
I don't know if I explained that well at all.
No, I think I understand. Yeah, like if you're training for the same group of people, maybe a different subsection of that organization. Generally, the culture is the same. So there's not a lot of nomenclature that needs to be changed or diversified. It's relatively similar. The actual application of what they're doing might be different, but same group of apples, I guess you could say.
Yeah, to an extent. I mean, the bulk of my training to start with was all folks that came from my same walk of life. They were
Right.
all prior SF dudes. They knew what was what. You just had to train them in a thing that they may not have been exposed to before, or maybe were a little rusty. And then I transitioned to people who were all civilians. Almost none of them were ever prior military. And you're like, wow, okay, we're starting from scratch. Let's
Right.
go. Yeah.
Does and forgive my ignorance, but does Force Recon fall under MARSOC? MARSOC it's about maybe a decade old. It's relatively new. I could be speaking out of turn, but does Force Recon fall under MARSOC? Is that accurate?
No. What took place was when the special operations community decided to incept the Marine Corps into their ranks, they disbanded the Force Reconnaissance Unit and renamed them MARSOC. Now, the regular, and I hate to use that word, but it's going to work. The regular Marine Corps said, hold on a minute. We still have a need for the skills and mission set that the Force Reconnaissance companies were doing.
Right.
So after about a year and change, they brought them back. To answer your question, the reconnaissance and the Force Reconnaissance companies do not fall under MARSOC. They are not under the command and control of SOCOM. The critical skills operators comprising MARSOC are an entity unto themselves.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah, and almost 10 years old. They stood up in 2006.
Okay, good stuff. Good for them.
Yeah.
And so what would MARSOC's primary mandate be? What are they responsible for mostly?
Oh, as far as I'm aware, and I don't have a huge touch point to them these days,
Right.
they do a lot of the same things that CAG might do, that the SEALs might do. There's a lot of running of sources. There's a lot of targeted raids. There's a lot of intelligence collection, assaulting. I mean, it's probably very similar to the things that you were doing, I would imagine. The one thing that they're not really doing, and it's because it's just not their purview, is what like a special forces ODA team would do. They're not doing foreign internal defense or anything like that. So
Right. Interesting.
Yeah.
Very cool.
There's probably somebody out there that's going to flame me for everything I just said.
Well, man, we put ourselves out here. There's going to be people out there that have all kinds of stuff to say, no matter what. So it comes with the territory, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
So what what do you got coming up? Like what's in the hopper for you, Brad? And where do you see yourself, say, 3 years from now? Do you have any set goals for yourself? What is it that you're tackling to keep yourself busy, but also to give yourself a daily purpose?
Yeah, that's a good question. So obviously I have kids. They are never ending in responsibilities and joy. So that's thing one. I do have a whiskey distillery, as I mentioned, which I am trying to expand. And so that's going to take the first, probably the next 6 to 9 months, growing that and putting more product out. Maintaining the gun business is probably good for me right now as a one-man show in both endeavors. Without a staff to task, it's challenging. So I have to be cautious about where I spend my time, as limited as it is. And then I've also thought about just to keep myself engaged physically and mentally, deploying again, maybe going back overseas to do training to groups outside of the United States. It's I like the travel. I like the challenge. And
interesting. So in what would that look like? Is there a specific organization or group that you would work for, or like anywhere in particular international that you have your sights on?
No, I don't think there's necessarily a geography that I would be tethered to. I would take, there's a lot of United States military industrial complex. It's huge. It's huge.
Yes.
There's all these defense subcontractors and primes that are doing work and providing training both domestically and overseas. And they're always looking for talent. I would be readily available to provide said talent. I just sort of want to feel it out. How long do I want to be gone? What level of hotspot would I really want to go to? What's an acceptable risk at this point in my life? At my age, with the responsibilities and children that I have, do I want to, take that risk or don't I? So I'm not exactly certain who it would be for at this point. I just know that it's difficult for guys like us not to be active, not to be busy, not to be doing something. I have to do something that's challenging mentally, physically. If I can't, I'm going to go crazy.
For sure. Yeah,
I do. And then I'm trying the media thing as well. The podcast, the YouTube videos. It's something that I've launched as well. And it's so far keeping me busy along with other things.
Wow. Yeah. It sounds like you got a few things in the hopper. So a couple questions just based off of what you just shared with me. So one, the whiskey distillery, do you have a title for it? What will the whiskey, will it have a title, or are you going to figure that out once what is it?
Oh yeah. No, I've had this since 2001. Okay. I had a distiller's permit that was what you call a license in the United States in 2001. And I started it up then, and it's just kind of been on pause because of the little ones and their growth and my other responsibilities. But I'm at a position where I can explode it. It's called Raider Distilling. It is an homage to the Marine Raiders of World War II.
Amazing.
And we make a bourbon and a single malt whiskey.
Good for you. Good stuff. Well, I can't wait to taste it when it's ready.
I will send you a bottle, no doubt.
Right. Yeah. And then for the podcast, what are you doing with the podcast? Where's it at? Does it have a title? Have you put out a couple episodes? Where are you at with that?
Yeah, we probably have 17, 18 hours worth of content that's published already. Amazing. Folks can go to bradcolbert.us for a link to all things Iceman related. The podcast is called Carry On. It's available on Spotify, Apple, iHeartMedia. You can find it on YouTube as well. So
right on. And we'll make sure we put that in our description box too, and people can find you that way. So good stuff, man. That is awesome. So you got a few things coming up. I guess we're coming up on about an hour. Don't want to rob you too much of your time, but with the thought of maybe providing training overseas right now, it sounds like it's in contemplation phase. It's got to be right for you and your life and your situation with your family. Of course, you do your own risk assessment to see if it's worth it. Is there anything that would be a hard no for you? Like, would it be a certain area or a certain amount of time, or are you still in so much in the contemplation phase that you haven't really thought about it too much?
That's another good question. I would have to be cautious about the level of risk. Right. For example, going to Ukraine, doing work there would be probably more than I feel is fair to my family.
Right.
I don't want to do something so risky that I may not be returning.
Right.
But I also don't want to do something that is incredibly docile and mundane. So somewhere in the middle. Yeah. There's lots of places that occupy that middle ground. The nice thing about the world is it's always melting down. There's always hot spots. There's always a group needing training of some form and fashion or a thing. So right. I think that's one thing, the level of risk. And then also, the level of amount of time that I'd be gone. I deployed after the Marine Corps for the government. 90 days was probably the longest, and right. That was manageable. Yeah. I would probably do something like that, maybe 60 to 90 days gone at a time. And I'd be okay with that.
Yeah, right on. So you'll keep the options open, and if something presents itself that's enticing for you, you'll take it. Good for you. So probably the probably the most healthiest approach, rather than putting too much pressure on yourself, saying you got to be here, or you got to do that, or you got to respond to this person or that person. That's probably a good approach.
No, we're both retired, so now we masters of our own destiny.
Yeah, man, I tell you, I'm retired, but I'm as busy now, active. I don't like to use the word busy. I'm as active now as I was, I think, when I was in the unit. And, I've shared this a couple of times with a few other people, but love my time in uniform. But I know what I'm doing right now is what I was meant to do. Like every opportunity I get to provide training for our local law enforcement, municipal, provincial, or federal, I absolutely love it. And, I would say probably the last 2.5 years, 60% of the revenue generated with the business has been law enforcement, probably 20% to our military, and then 20% to the general public. So it's such a good feeling helping other people. And sometimes it's just a nugget of advice or encouragement or a little bit of mentorship. Other times it's really technical and really tactical with the application of how things are unfolding. And man, I don't know about you, but I absolutely love it, especially when you can see those, eyes open and those aha moments. It fills my cup. Love it.
Yeah, it is definitely an altruistic feeling. I love it as well. It is. I definitely didn't do it, nor do it for the money. It's really for the challenge and the reward. And that reward, as you said, comes from that epiphany that somebody gets when it finally clicks. It's a great feeling. Yeah,
it sure is. Yeah. Awesome. One more question before we wrap it up. If you could give advice to a 21, 22-year-old that's interested in joining the Marine Corps, and he's maybe in contemplation phase, he's trying to figure out his next bound, what advice would you give that individual, picturing, things are different than when you and I went through the pipeline, but given the information that now and the status of the country, the status of the world, what advice would you give that young 21 or 22-year-old?
I would definitely want them to make the decision for the right reasons. A lot of folks, because we're not a conscription country, enlist in the military for the intangibles, college benefit, or it's a job, or I don't have anywhere else to go. If that is the only motivation for you to enlist, then I wouldn't do it.
I agree.
You need to enlist for the service, to do something better than yourself, to be a part of something more than yourself, the collective whole. If you want to challenge yourself, find out what you're made of, be part of something that is greater than you are, then absolutely put the uniform on. And at the end of your minimum requirement, you want to leave, you leave with your head held high, or stay until 30 years and you retire.
Yes.
But if you don't do it for the right reasons, your experience is going to be miserable. You are going to find yourself in trouble, and you're just going to embarrass the uniform that you put on for that short period of time. So I guess that's what I would say.
I think that's great advice, man. I couldn't agree more. I would echo that 100%. The reality is, I'm sure the States is very similar to Canada, but once the individual is in the military, there are so many options left and right. You can move laterally. You can be challenged however you really see yourself being challenged. But the advice that I would top that up with is you got to go get it. It's not going to be handed to you. If there's something that you're interested in, you got to go get it. You got to express that interest and let people help you. And there's great opportunities when you're in the military, but I think you're absolutely right. The purpose has got to be strong, and that collective togetherness is it's quite unique. It's I think we're I don't want to speak for you, but I think we're very lucky to be part of something that was as good as it was.
Oh, absolutely. I am incredibly grateful for the opportunities that I was given, the people that I met, the experiences that I went through, and the virtues that I learned along the way. I have no doubt that I am who I am today because of the forging that took place during those periods in uniform. No doubt.
Amen. That's awesome. Well, so I'm super happy for you. I'm really, thrilled that you were able to make the time today. I wish you nothing but the best and all the success in your endeavors moving forward. Please stay in touch. We'll get all your information in the description box so people can find you and support you. And just keep safe and just keep being cool.
Hey, I really appreciate it, brother. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Take care of yourself.